By sunrise, the ocean had taken 6 houses, 2 Teslas, and the entire west side of Coral Haven, leaving nothing but a churn of salt water and marble countertops drifting out to sea. And there I was, standing on the one chunk of Army Corps concrete still left above water, cradling my coffee like it was a life raft, muttering, "Should have left the wall, Linda. You really should have left the dam." Linda Ashcraftoff, the woman who tried to outsmart the Atlantic for the sake of a better ocean view. Linda was, for lack of a better word, a force of nature in a sun hat, 61 years old. Self-proclaimed real estate mogul, HOA president for life, and the kind of person who'd file a formal complaint if a seagull nested too close to her property line. Me? I'm Grant Dobbins, 55, retired Navy, ex-banker, and, until recently, a full-time backyard griller who just wanted to sip cheap beer and watch the waves roll in from my 1970s ranch on the high end of Coral Haven. That house wasn't much to look at, but it had one thing that kept me sleeping easy: a thick, reinforced seawall built back in '86, the year after Gloria flooded the coast and turned half the street into a swamp. That wall, to me, was peace of mind and, frankly, non-negotiable. But to Linda, it was a visual affront to community values, and, as she explained to me within 24 hours of my moving in, completely out of character with the aesthetic portfolio of Coral Haven. I about spit out my coffee right there. Portfolio? Lady, it's the ocean. It doesn't care about your Instagram grid. But that was Linda, all charm and claws, adjusting her sunglasses and warning me that the board would be reviewing all unauthorized marine infrastructure. Yeah, that happened. 1 week later, I found a letter in my mailbox, official HOA wax seal and all, telling me my seawall was a violation of shoreline visual continuity. I called Linda, thinking we could talk sense. But she doubled down. "The wall blocks community access to the sea," she sniffed, "and our covenants require unimpeded ocean vistas for all residents." I tried explaining the basics: Army Corps, hurricane protection, the whole deal, but Linda had an answer for everything, mostly involving property values and the natural flow of sand migration, which, honestly, sounded like something she'd heard on HGTV after too many glasses of Chardonnay. The citations piled up: unauthorized modification, obstruction of vistas, even impediment to coastal connectivity. So I did my homework. Army Corps blueprints, FEMA flood maps, storm records going back to the Reagan years. Turns out, that wall had saved Coral Haven 4 times already. But every fact I brought to the next HOA meeting. The mood was set. Linda had PowerPoints, no kidding, showing my seawall from every angle, captions like community disruption and view obstruction zone, and she spun the whole thing like I was threatening their way of life. When I tried to explain, calm, ex-Navy voice and all, that the wall wasn't just my insurance, but theirs too, folks barely looked up. One lady asked if we could build a lower, friendlier wall, and Linda jumped in before I could answer, declaring, "Any wall is a violation of our coastal aesthetic." I said, "Linda, hurricanes aren't aesthetic," but it was like arguing with the tide. The board voted 4-1 to take it down. I was the one. Appealed, lost 4-1 again. Hired a lawyer, Sarah Chan, best in the business for HOA nightmares. She said the wall was. The demolition crew showed up. Linda brought donuts, posed for Facebook selfies, and, as the last chunk of concrete was hauled away, announced, "Now this is true oceanfront living." For 1 golden hour, with the wall gone, you could see straight to the horizon. If you ignored the Atlantic hurricane season, wouldn't you know it, 2 weeks later, the first tropical advisory of the year didn't bother. Linda, especially, insisted, "We have insurance for a reason. Modern construction, emergency services. You know what I mean? The kind of faith that only comes from never having bailed out your own basement at 3 a.m. When the evacuation order came, most neighbors cleared out. Not Linda. She stayed, posting on Facebook about community resilience. Friday night, the storm hit, winds screaming, water rising, power cut right at midnight. I sat in the dark with my flashlight, listening as the wind died and the new sound came: water surging where it didn't belong. By dawn, the seawall gap created a straight shot for the surge to roll in, flooding 6 houses, wiping out the brand new clubhouse, and turning the pool into a briny mess. Linda's prized aesthetic asset portfolio was somewhere in the Atlantic by breakfast. Within a day, news crews had descended. Community chooses views over safety, disaster ensues, blared the headlines. The local meteorologist stood where my wall used to be and explained, live on TV, how that seawall was the only thing that could have stopped the flood. Insurance adjusters came next, and, wouldn't you know, every one of them denied the claims, citing willful negligence, removal of federally engineered protection. Linda, who always had a plan, found herself out of options. The next HOA meeting was tense. To put it mildly, Linda tried her best to spin it. We made the best decision with the information we had. But residents weren't buying it. Marvin, whose house was gutted, stood up, hands shaking. The community filed a class action suit, gross negligence, personal liability, the works. As the legal firestorm grew, Linda's real estate empire crumbled. Tenants moved out, properties lost value. Buyers vanished. The trial, when it finally came, was brutal. My favorite moment? When they read Linda's own emails to the jury. Getting rid of Grant's ugly wall tomorrow, property values will skyrocket. The jury needed less than 4 hours to find her liable. $14.7 million in damages, plus costs, plus attorney fees. They froze her assets. Her properties went into receivership. The Army Corps rebuilt the seawall, taller, stronger, this time painted navy blue, which actually looked pretty sharp. The HOA had a new president, Marvin, who'd learned the hard way never to vote. When I walk out to my new seawall, coffee in hand, I think about her sitting in that little apartment, staring at her laptop, whispering, $16 million, the price of ignoring every warning, every expert, and every ounce of common sense for a prettier view. So yeah, if you're ever tempted to trade safety for aesthetics, remember, the ocean doesn't care about your property values, your bylaws, or your board votes. It cares about physics, and physics always wins. I learned that in the Navy. Linda learned it in a courtroom. Me? I'll take the wall, the view, and a little peace of mind. Tell me, if it were your neighborhood, would you rather risk the flood for a prettier photo? Or would you rather fight for the wall, even if it isn't much to look at? Drop your take in the comments, because honestly, this story's just getting started. You know, for a long time after the verdict, there was this weird hush hanging over Coral Haven, like the place itself was embarrassed to be on the map for all the wrong reasons. It wasn't just the wreckage left behind by Miriam, though believe me, driving past Linda's old house with its busted windows and wild sea grass creeping through the deck boards, it looked like the set of some climate change PSA. No, the real damage was quieter, stretched out in the faces of folks trying to rebuild their lives and trust in each other, looking at every HOA meeting agenda like it might be booby-trapped. Insurance money was a joke. Even the lucky ones got maybe half of what they needed. More than a few families, especially the newer ones with big mortgages and no savings, just packed up and left, their for sale signs sagging in yards that still smelled faintly of salt and loss. Every Saturday, you'd see moving trucks, waterlogged sofas on the curb, and old-timers sitting on lawn chairs, just shaking their heads, wondering how it all went so wrong over something as stupid as a wall. Me? I was better off than most. My place needed a new roof, a fresh coat of paint, and about 3 months of cleaning, but thanks to the Army Corps and a stubborn streak a mile wide, my biggest headache was trimming storm-blasted palms. Funny how the ugliest, most out-of-character house on the street turned out to be the last one standing. My neighbors, those who stayed, didn't say much at first, but more than a few started dropping by, some to ask about my contractor, some just to sit on my seawall and watch the sunrise, real quiet-like, maybe seeing it differently now. And then there was Linda. You'd think she would have moved to Montana, somewhere as far from the ocean and HOA meetings as humanly possible. But nope, she stayed in the area, renting a little duplex behind a strip mall, trying to reinvent herself online as some kind of coastal mindfulness guru. Her blog, Seaside Soulfulness, yeah, I checked it out, was all pastel graphics and inspirational quotes about letting go of attachments. Not a single mention of hurricanes, courtrooms, or lawsuits. She even started hosting virtual sunset meditations, sharing stock photos of beaches she'll never walk again. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But karma, as my dad used to say, keeps a better ledger than the IRS. The new HOA board, led by Marvin, who'd gone from soft-spoken to hard-nosed overnight, started. Every meeting with a flood risk update and, I kid you not, a standing ovation for the new, improved seawall. They rewrote the bylaws. No more demolishing anything remotely structural without a majority vote, independent engineering review, and for good measure, an annual wall appreciation day. Some neighbors grumbled, mostly out of habit, but nobody dared mention aesthetics again. Of course, the legal mess didn't just vanish. The class action settlement money trickled in, barely enough for repairs, never enough for closure. The media circus lasted longer than the cleanup. Every so often, a camera crew would show up, hoping to catch the infamous Mr. Dobbins out grilling, but I kept my head down. This wasn't a story I needed to relive on national TV. You know what I mean? Still, Coral Haven changed. The houses that weren't gutted got sold to cash investors, who turned them into heirlooms. Summers got louder, winters got lonelier. And the only constant was the wind off the Atlantic, rattling the new hurricane glass in every direction. You could feel it at community picnics, folks standing a little closer, swapping storm prep. Family, bonded by shared disaster and the need to make sure it never happens again. I started hosting coffee mornings on my seawall. No speeches, just good strong brew and a view that was still pretty. Great, wall or not. We'd talk about everything and nothing, weather, fishing, what kind of generator to buy, even politics, if we were feeling brave. Once, Marvin joked, next hurricane season, I'm chaining myself to your wall. We all laughed, but nobody argued. If there's a moral in any of this, and God knows, we've had time to debate it over 100 paper cups, it's that fighting nature is a losing game. Physics, storms, the law of unintended consequences, they don't care about majority votes or pretty PowerPoints. Community means listening, not just to each other, but to the facts, the experts, and maybe a grumpy old neighbor with a Navy pension and a gut feeling. You build trust the same way you build seawalls, layer by stubborn layer, double reinforced, with no shortcuts. So yeah, every sunrise now, I stand out there with my coffee, feeling the breeze, grateful for concrete, science, and maybe a little bit of poetic justice. Coral Haven's not perfect. We've got scars. But the people who stuck it out, who learned, adapted, and decided that peace of mind matters more than an unobstructed view, they're the ones writing the next chapter. That some walls are worth fighting for, even when nobody else sees their value. Tell me, would you rather live with the view or live with the risk? Sound off below, because these days, in Coral Haven, everybody's got an opinion, and for once, we're actually listening.